Hello and welcome to another episode of the Classic Chloe Show, where we talk about music and its effects on every aspect of our daily lives. I'm your host, Chloe Castillo, and I have another fantastic guest for you today, Fabian Garcia from The Breakaway Show. Fabian, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
It is so good to be here and see someone like yourself doing something so important on the conservative side that no one else is doing except for you. So glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your understanding of the whole music discussion. That's super refreshing. I was telling you a minute ago off air. It's great to find people who really understand the importance of music and how it impacts culture. So I'm excited about this discussion. Let's dive in. You reached out to me and, expressing your concern for this as well. And again, like I said, it was great to hear someone else who understands this. So tell me about just, what's your background? Where do you come from on this cultural topic?
Sure. So I was basically born into classical music, meaning my mother just played it for me all throughout my childhood, not even knowing what it was. Later on, when I was a young adult, I got into classical music, actually got into it, not just listened to it. And, the impact it's had on me has been really immeasurable because people have to think about this. Rap has been around for 60-ish years, rock music around 80 years. But before that, for hundreds and hundreds of years, the prevailing type of music was classical music. So there's generations and hundreds of years of history in that type of music and the way that it ebbed and flowed through society, how it changed, how people iterated it, created off it, and even the characters involved in classical music, like the composers and the copyists. There's so much of a rich history in that people uh, would do well to learn about and how it's affected our culture and society. A lot of people don't even realize that they listen to so much classical music every time they watch a movie. It's like a subtle thing behind the scenes, but it really affects you. And the fact that there's no words, which something is something that I like, you're really able to tap into the soul and just feel the music, feel the what the composer was feeling when they wrote that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a classical pianist myself. I started playing when I was 4 years old, and I grew up with classical music as well. And I can tell you it had an enormous impact on my upbringing. And not that it was ever something I think I really even thought about. I was just really grew up with this love and appreciation for real art. And I guess coming into the world a little later, really seeing outside of my bubble and seeing what was actually mainstream in the culture as a young teenager, I think it gave me a perspective on what art can be and then what art is now. And that really was a shock for me. So back to the classical aspect of this though. So you told me that you used to be a donor for the LA Philharmonic before they required vax mandates. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I've been a big supporter of the LA Philharmonic, Hollywood Bowl, uh, all these places that bring classical music to people. But during COVID, they started to require the vaccine to get in. So you would have to show your passport or your vaccine passport to get in, and I would sneak in. But the problem is right when if you visit the LA Philharmonic, the very beginning when you walk in, there's these two really big escalators up, and you have to basically take them. So they would have a guard sitting at the bottom of the escalators, checking your vaccine stamp and giving you a wristband in order to continue to go up. Well, I started sneaking into the LA Philharmonic, which I donated to, which I've also bought tickets for, which I would promote and bring people to. This is like the place I like to go. And after sneaking in two or three times, they then said, well, we have a new policy where you actually have to have a booster in addition to the vaccine because our patrons and our visitors are of elderly age, so they're at higher risk for this. So once that happened, I said, enough is enough. I contacted uh, the customer service. I said, listen, I want all my money back. I want all my tickets back. I'm not doing this. This is absolutely ridiculous. And that was the last time uh, for the next 3 years or so that I didn't visit the Los Angeles Philharmonic.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, I love that you kept sneaking in. That's fantastic. I love the spirit there. But, it's amazing, I guess, the fact that, you taking away your donations wasn't a threat to them, if that makes sense, because they're so heavily funded by the left. And I feel like, it's a shame that as conservatives, we don't put our money basically a lot of times where our mouth is, to be quite frank. When it comes to culture, we talk about conservative values and conservatism in the arts, but then we don't really actually follow up with that a lot of the times. And so, props to you for actually standing up to that and for being someone who was a huge supporter of that art in the first place. I want to
Yeah.
make a little point here because you just said that their reasoning was because of the elderly. So, kind of changing course from the vax to the age here. Why is that the case that it's always elderly who are into classical music? Where are the youth in this space? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question. On TikTok, with very, very short attention spans, one thing that I do, and I bring a lot of people to classical music concerts for the very first time. The one thing I always tell them, I preface this, I'm going to say, because you don't know the piece of music. First of all, let me back up. I try to get them to listen to whatever symphony we're going to listen to. So at least they have an idea of what parts sound like. They like some parts, they can hear it, even if it's subconsciously. If you go into it without knowing anything, you're going to be sitting for maybe a 45-minute symphony. And if you don't have the attention span, if you're used to 3, 4 minute songs or 25-second videos on TikTok, it's a lot. It's a lot for you to sit there without your phone and listen to music. I see people get fidgety after like 5 or 15 minutes. I see their body language and how they start moving. So I preface that. So I think that's one thing. It's just the amount of time you have to invest in classical music to actually really get it. It's either nothing just because you enjoy it, or if you're going to be a casual fan or a more avid fan, then you actually have to study the stuff and who's doing what and what piece you're listening to, etc. But in addition to that, I think it's the fact that really, I'll say the left, but I don't really mean the left in the sense of like communists, but just the left of the political spectrum has taken over music and made it about really ridiculous things, very low level stuff, like superficial things. I talk a lot about how I'm a big fan of country music. Wasn't when I was growing up. Started listening to the lyrics, how positive they are. They're about family, owning land, creating your legacy with your family, being with your friends. Everyone makes fun of having the pickup truck and the dog. But that's small town life. Those are really good values. And then you listen to something like gangster rap. And gangster rap is all about me, right? I'm the I'm going to get your girl. I'm going to make money. It's very selfish. It's incredibly selfish. Screw everyone. I'm the only thing that matters. And I think that mindset being proliferated into the communities, especially low income communities. I was a very poor kid growing up. I grew up listening to only rap. I didn't like the cops just because I heard Tupac when I was growing up. So it's those types of things that I had to realize, like, this is not real. And then if you look back and you see that early on there was many different forms of rap, and only one of them was negative and gangster rap. That's the one that was chosen to explode. Those are the ones that they chose to have the characters like Diddy, like Tupac, like Biggie, and things like that. It's like, why exactly was that the one out of all the types of rap music to make it? Then you have to think about, go down the rabbit hole. Who was promoting it? Was the CIA involved? What were they doing at the time? And it's just incredibly sad what's happened to music, I believe.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to ask you on this. So you mentioned the CIA. What's your conspiracy or what's your thought on that?
Well, we know that the CIA is always trying to control culture because, as the old saying, politics is downstream from culture. And if you can control that, you can control a lot. So in the 90s, especially in Los Angeles, uh, we had a lot of things like the crack epidemic. We had a lot of things like policing and a lot of racism and things like this. And the music really just struck a chord, I guess, for people. But it was programming. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pre-programming. Why is it that Ice Cube is kind of the odd man out in this entire Dr. Dre, Diddy thing? And he speaks out about this, and he says, yes, the rap industry is controlled, is absolutely controlled. I live in Hollywood, and I worked in nightlife for a very long time. And something people don't know is when, let's just pick a rap artist. When they get signed to a record company, they fly to Hollywood from wherever they're at. They sign a contract that's a terrible contract that gives you, let's say, 5% royalties after you've paid back your advance to the production company or the music agency. So you're basically making no money. Then they send them out to the clubs to go perform. This is a brand new artist, just signed. They maybe have a hot track, and they perform in the club. 6 months later, once the music industry is done with them, because they can replicate the sound, the look of the person, because everything is done digitally now, they say, well, you know what? We don't want to give you a new contract because we're going to have to pay you more money, but we have a million clones that we can replicate. Give them music, give them a look, give them a nice Ferrari that they rent. and then you're going to be the next guy. So it's just churning through people and leaving them destitute and leaving them broke and say, well, you had your 5 minutes of fame, because at this point it's not even 15 minutes anymore. And it's just sad to see all these artists that came young, 16, 17, 18 years old, because they get you young, sign this contract where you're never going to make any money, you're never going to succeed, but you think you're on top of the world for 6 months because you're on the radio. And they just literally use these people for their own gain.
Wow. I feel like this industry is so deep, and it's honestly, if you're going to take it into the spiritual, I'm a spiritual person, I'm a Christian, but I would say, there's a spiritual battle going on here. And when you look deeper into Hollywood as an industry, you're talking about how, the government, the CIA in particular, seeks to control through, programming. I would agree with you on that 100%. And I think it's very interesting when you see the kind of music that Americans are becoming more and more accustomed to and are seeing as just normal in our society. What the kind of lyrics that are out there that they just think is your everyday song that anyone of any age can just listen to in the grocery store is mind-boggling to me. I mean, it's not a matter of some dark web adult content site that has these kind of lyrics and has these kind of ideas. It's just your everyday music. And so I find that so interesting, and I do believe the programming is absolutely real. And I think it's a very demonic industry, if you will. It's controlled by, I would say, the more dark side of things as far as where the money's coming from as well. So let's come back with more from Fabian in just a second. We're going to do a couple quick ad breaks, and we'll be back in just a minute.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
If I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's feeling with more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
Think you need a new roof? Think again. Roofs aren't made like they used to be. They have significantly less asphalt in them than they did 20 years ago. That's causing roofs to wear out way before they should. Roof Max can extend the life of your roof for at least 5 and up to 15 years, guaranteed. 9 out of 10 roofs qualify. Restore your roof at a fraction of the cost for a new roof. Mention Patriot TV and get their $859 roof tune-up for free. Call 1-800-ROOF-MAX. Welcome back to the show, Fabian. Great to have you on here. So let's go back to our discussion here about music and the culture and its impacts on our society at large. What do you think about the youth of America these days? What kind of content are they consuming? I know you've talked about it a little bit in the show already. What do you think what impact is this having?
I think the era, personally speaking, I think the era of the celebrity is getting close to being over, to be honest with you. Things have become so decentralized. I have a young sister. She's like 13 years old. And I asked her a few years ago, I said, who's famous to you? Like, who is the most famous person? Is it like the Jonas Brothers? No, brother. Those guys are lame. Okay, well, is it Kim Kardashian? No. Who do you like? And she gave me a list of YouTubers. So in the music industry, I know that it's still pretty much dominated by the big companies, but more and more, I think it's becoming decentralized, which is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that music companies have less control over things, music creation, just because there's so much technology that you can harness with the push of a button to create music. Now, obviously, that's typically not real music with live instruments being played, but it's a digital form, so it is music. And the second is that, I just think that the messaging has gotten so simple that if you introduce complexity to what music is now, it's going to turn people off. And I mean, how many people write Beyonce songs? Like 15 different writers work on it, and how many producers work on it? How many marketers make her look the way she wants to look? And then it's presented to you on a platter because they already have a probability of that succeeding with that type of sound, with that type of snare sound, and they just know how to prepackage things to you. I think that's really dumbing down our ability to be creative. I mean, you think about someone like Mozart, for example, or Beethoven, or anyone. They're sitting in a room with no electricity. You can't record music and play it for someone else. They literally sit there and write every single instrument for that symphony themselves, have someone copy it on paper, find people to play it, train them, and then perform it. That was a very, very massive undertaking. Now anyone could buy, Fruity Loops or FL Studio, they call it now, and just press a few buttons, have a template. And I think that's really bad for the music industry.
So you mentioned it's very simplistic, and adding any complexity is going to, turn people away. I've found the vast majority of music these days, just to be quite frank, is just appealing to, like, people's lower senses. And it's a shame. And whether it be, like, let's talk about Sabrina Carpenter or Olivia Rodrigo or even Taylor Swift these days. She started out where she was more your country girl. I mean, yeah, I'm sure she was bought by a lot of people in the industry, but still, beyond that, though, she still had that almost innocence in a way for a lot of her career. And now you look at her and she looks exactly the same as everyone else. Everyone has the same look. All the women wear these leotard, sparkly, fishnet stockings. They all have the same and backup dancers. I mean, that's a huge thing now. I mean, that was kind of like a Michael Jackson standalone type thing. And now it's like every single artist you see, there is no concert without backup dancers. What happened to the days where you had a pianist on stage, you had a singer with a microphone, and they weren't necessarily this sex symbol. They were just amazing artists. And where did that kind of quality art go, and where did the appreciation for it go is my question. And so I guess, what do you think about the desensitized, I guess, just the fact that we've really desensitized our culture and our society to the over sexualization of, first of all, women, and honestly young people as well?
I think that's a great question, and one of the things I see is that it's gone from a musical concert to an entertainment concert. As you said, you need backup dancers, you need these crazy pants on, you need lights, you need all these things just to keep people's attention. Where it should be, as you were saying, if you're listening to like a Rachmaninoff piece, it's just one pianist on stage. Or if you're looking at something like a symphony, you have maybe 60 people on stage, but they're all doing one thing together. Whereas I have a lot of friends who are backup dancers, who have been backup dancers for like Pitbull and all these big acts. And this is their art. So dancing is an art, but when you have to include lights, smoke, LEDs, backup dancers, this and that, at what point does it stop becoming about the music and start becoming more about the entertainment aspect of it? Even if you go back to the 1970s, which I love watching old Leonard Skinner concerts or just any concert from that era, the people on stage were performing, they were playing their musical instruments, but they weren't really dancing around. They weren't trying to entertain you. The music was the entertainment. So I think we've shifted so far away from that it's time to bring live music back, to create people, to get people who are creating really unique music, which there are out there, of course, but they're overshadowed by these big musical record labels that just want one type of music because they know it works, and they rinse and repeat over and over again. And I think it's killing the music industry.
Wow, that's a very interesting take. And you mentioned a little while ago as well that the music industry is kind of becoming fractured in a way, because less of these big companies owning everything and more of artists, really making a break on YouTube or, social media. And I've heard people say a lot, oh, well, for the conservative leaning artist, and I don't mean like MAGA musicians or just Christian artists, by the way, I just mean music that has good values in it. I've been told a lot, well, they can make it on their own now because they can be independent artists. Independent artists are making it, bigger now more than ever, which is true. And, now we have social media right at our fingertips. We can grow our audiences without having to go through record label. This is all somewhat true, but I would personally argue there's still a massive machine, whether it's a machine that involves companies that own, like record labels, or whether it involves a massive machine that is, making the algorithm set where we are being fed the specific agenda with these specific artists, or I mean, whatever it may be. I am 100% positive there's a massive billion-dollar machine behind any major music artist these days. So whether they started out small or whatever happened to them, if they're mainstream, there's a very good chance they're backed by this machine. So what do you think needs to happen on the conservative side of things, just to even start creating somewhat of a machine to be able to support these kind of artists who want to have good values and want to espouse, something other than Satanism in their music? What can we do to really support those artists, I guess, starting out?
Yeah, that's one of the most important questions that we are facing right now as a collective. Uh, and I think that number one, people have to educate themselves on the importance of music and what it does to society. So again, very appreciative of what you're doing on your show. Second, I think the money needs to flow there. People keep talking about the parallel economy where conservatives back companies that have their values in mind. And I think that's great. Vote with your dollar, all this stuff. But I would guesstimate that the vast majority, over 95% of that, are going to political action committees, donations from people to go to things that are going to push certain values, which is fine. However, we need to talk more about the impact that music has, exactly like you're doing, so people can be aware of that. And then you have to have people to say, you know what, I'm going to take up the banner and start a nonprofit or start my own conservative music agency, whatever it is. And then money has to flow into that sector. Obviously, it has to prove viability. You have to get some kind of ROI, whether it be that you take a poll and you see that people's values are starting to shift. That would be an indication that you're actually succeeding. But get this music out to people and stop focusing on the parameters and the goalposts that have been set by these big labels. The 3 to 5 minute song, that you have to have this kind of sound right now because that's what's hot. Let people do what they want to do, but infuse it with good messaging. And you know what? Just I think if these people get paid enough money, I'm not saying they have to be all millionaires, but if they can make a living on it, then they won't be tempted by the carrot that the music industry hangs that says, you know what, that was great what you did. Now come into our big fancy offices here in Hollywood, and let's talk about the next phase, your evolution, right? Everyone wants to evolve. Oh, I was this before. Miley Cyrus was, Hannah Montana. Now she became this, and as you said, Taylor Swift became this. Why do you have to keep evolving as a musical artist with your look and your sound? Like, if you do something well, just keep doing it to whatever your heart's desire is. If it made you happy in the beginning, stop. Don't do what is not going to make you happy. But there has to be awareness, number one, and there has to be an infusion of money and donations to go into this space.
So well said. I love it when someone comes on the show and talks about funding. That's like one of my favorite things because no one wants to talk about the fact that it's and like you said as well. And most I would say big funding in the conservative movement is going to PACs, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's good that that's being funded. I mean, Lord knows that needs to happen, but also the focus on culture needs to become, I guess, more of a common talking point for conservatives. So I appreciate your willingness to throw that out there because it is so true. So last thoughts from you before we wrap up here. What do you hope to see in the golden age of art and culture in America?
I would hope to see the Trump administration start making a push towards uh, music that has good values, that has good meaning, that has good foundations. And if that comes through increasing the arts, I know the arts have been destroyed as far as funding. It's the first thing to go because a lot of times they don't see it as something necessary, which I think it absolutely is. I think the mentality of what's important has to start shifting with conversations like this. And then, secondly, I think the administration has to start utilizing all the money that they save or they're saving from USAID and start funneling it to things like music, specifically music that is grounded in a good foundation and a good message. So that's from a governmental side. From a more capitalistic, privatized side, I think again funding, starting these music companies. I know Nashville is a really a good hotbed. They call it the Hollywood of the Midwest now. I think other places have to start competing with Hollywood just to give Hollywood some kind of competition, especially if you're a capitalist. If you see someone else doing something that's working because they took a chance and now it's resonating with the population, I think Hollywood will start shifting because all they care about is money at the end of the day, unless they're really tied to this cultural thing where they want to break down family, the nuclear family, the church, and really become as hegemonic power in music, just like Antonio Gramsci wrote in the prison notebooks, how you have to take over culture to become a cultural Marxist god in his sense. So I think those are some of the things that we need to start focusing on because if we do nothing, nothing will change. We see music going down the drain. And if we want to do something, if we want to change it, we have to do something. If we do nothing, nothing will change.
Absolutely. I mean, I truly appreciate you coming on here to talk about this because you've said so many things so eloquently, and it's always amazing to have someone else besides myself talking about this. So I always truly appreciate those people like yourself. So Fabian, where can my audience find you?
You can find me on Instagram, the Fabian Garcia, on Twitter, or X. Sorry, I don't want a den name X. It's Fabian underscore 1776. And on Facebook, it's Patriot Fabian Garcia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please subscribe to the Classically Chloe Show on Rumble, YouTube, and Spotify. Please also follow me at classically_Chloe on Instagram and Classically Chloe on all other platforms. See you next week. God bless.